This is a quick look at Italy's first airmail issue after World War II. It came out first in October 1945, and it was continued for a couple of years. The designs were simple. One featured an airplane and clasped hands. The other featured a group of swallows, one swallow in particular. There were 9 designs. I believe it's 9 in the set, but that includes one, the bottom here, which is an overprint. The stamps were, according to Scott, photogravured. According to my Italian catalogs, rotogravured. If anyone knows the difference, or if it's just the same process, I know it must be quite similar. Question of shooting light through a membrane that has a photo on it, that affects the receptivity of the dye to the reception of ink when it's printed. You can see it's a fairly simple printing process. These are monochrome stamps. Italy had often produced much more colorful things. There are a few varieties of these stamps. My Italian catalog says there are watermark varieties. I don't think Scott mentions that. I put this together a while ago. I'm almost certain that there's no consideration of watermarks in Scott. They all were overprinted with a couple of types of overprints. And that is because as the war ended, northern Italy's territorial status was undetermined. When Germany surrendered, there were still Axis troops in the north of Italy, and the victorious Allies weren't sure what they were going to do to one of these territories, and that was Trieste. Trieste was disputed, and the Yugoslavs, who in hindsight fought on the quote-unquote right side of the war, claimed a lot of the territory. But Italy was extremely reluctant to give up the city Trieste itself. A compromise was eventually worked out, but I think it didn't happen until 1953, 8 years after the death, at the end of the war. I think it's useful to compare these stamps with earlier airmail stamps from Italy, which could be quite beautiful. Now, I think these stamps are really pretty items, very pretty. But when it comes to describing them, I come to the word bookish because they have illustrations on them, but also a lot of writing describing what it is. Almost like a plaque you'd see in a museum or in a municipal building or something like that, maybe even a church. This set is honoring Leonardo da Vinci and his attempts to come up with his brainstorming about how men could fly. And you see the contraption he thought would be worth trying out. I know later in life, in the early 20th century, people did try to fly using apparatus similar to this, with always disastrous consequences. But to go back, look at the busyness of these stamps, and then go back to the simplicity of this. And what this says to me is that this set of stamps in 1945 and on is emphasizing the very notion of flight, not talking about personal genius or technical matters. It's just the notion of flight. And one, it's swallows, very graceful birds indeed, who can do almost any kind of acrobatics they want in the air. And there is a plane. Well, my ornithological chops are very limited, but I do know what the plane is. And this is a picture of it in real life. Well, what is it? Well, if you look at it, you can see it's, judging by the 2 human bodies in the plane. And this is an actual photo. This is not someone's model or anything like that. You see, the plane is too small to be a commercial carrier of passengers, and it's also too small to be a really useful transport plane. What is it for? It's for war. This is the Caproni-Campini N.1. That's a heck of a name for something. Mr. Secondo Campini was an inventor, a technician, and so on in Italy. And during the 1930s, he spent a lot of time working on the notion of jet propulsion of aircraft. The Caproni Company was a company that could manufacture aircraft. And they got together working for the government, and the government gave the plane the designation N1. I don't know what the N stands for, but this was an actual jet plane, and it was believed for quite some time to be the world's first jet aircraft. It later came out that the Heinkel company in Germany had flown a jet plane exactly 1 year prior to the flight of this N1. But this was wartime, and other nations who were working on jet propulsion, people in the US, Britain was doing a lot of work on it. Germany had succeeded to some extent. And of course, Russia, the Soviet Union was working on it. These were military secrets, and they were not about to show the world that they had come up with a design for an actual functioning jet plane. The Italians, I think being Italians, went for the glory. They showed the world that they had built a jet plane. This is a photo of it flying over Rome. Now, I have to point out that these were really prototypes. Only two were ever completed. At the end of the war, one was, I believe, dismantled and taken to Britain for study. And the other one, I believe, is available for viewing in Milan, but I'm not sure. Not as a functioning plane, of course. Yes, what is the significance of the hand clasp? Well, I'd like to first ask the question, what is the significance of this jet plane? Isn't it rather inappropriate, kind of shocking that Italy, with its ignominious role in World War II and the decade before, 4 months after the war, is putting out stamps with one of their warplanes on it? What is going on? I think that to answer Alan's question, the handshake is to say, look, we are technically very capable. We built, if not the first, then one of the very first jet airplanes. But we do it now in peace. So that's my analysis. Others may have a different one. Certainly, Italy, the Italian population, was not clamoring for another war. They could hardly believe they were involved in the big one anyway. So I'm basically a selfish guy, and I didn't put this together to entertain you guys. I want to add a personal note here. This is an entry from my Unificato catalog. That's Italian. It is, however, 2.5 decades old. In fact, I don't know if it's still published. Alan, do you know?
Yes, Sassone is the one I know.
I happen to have three different types of. The other one is Bolefo, I think it calls itself. But they are from a few decades back. And as we know, there's been tremendous consolidation in national catalog production. France, for instance, only has one now. It had two 20 years ago, and it had 40 in 1930s or something like that. So this is the entry from the Unificato catalog. And this entry is discussing the overprint. Oh, first of all, let me say that the valuations are not in euros, they're in lira. So you divide by about 2,000, maybe even slightly more. So there's no $30 million tips in this catalog. The convention that they used was gratifyingly similar to that of Scott. That is to say, if there's a blank space, that means no such item is known to exist. So if you look at the first entry there, it says 6 lira on 3.2, but put on upside down. They say that in the entry here, only two are known, and they're used. So look, there is the valuation, 30 million lira. I hate, I just sounds ridiculous to say something like that. And then the other convention they use is like Scott, if they know or firmly believe that some do exist, but not enough to give a valuation, they put a dashed line in it. And I was glad to see that. Okay, so what are the varieties of this overprint? As I pointed out, one is when it's upside down. The next one says if you have a pair of stamps, one with the overprint and one without, that's worth something. But we don't have the ability to put a price on it. It's just a dashed line after it. One without the part of the overprint that would say lira 6, and that's known in mint condition, but hard to find and hard to evaluate in use. And one without the 6, but with the rest of the overprint, the lira and the squiggly line. And then finally, there is when the overprint is moved way up high on the stamp so that you can read the overprint value and the earlier 3,20 lira value. Well, I was hanging around New York City one day, and at lunch, there still were here and there scattered stamp stores. So I bought a pack of really very inexpensive stuff from a guy who had a small shop at the top of an ancient building on the same block as the Empire State Building. And it was a bunch of, I was just starting out and he was getting rid of stuff. In any case, in there was this stamp, which I'm showing now, with the overprinted lira and the squiggly lines, to use the technical term, but not the 6. So I sent it to the APS expert committee, and they responded to me. The APS expert committee declines to render an opinion. They couldn't get a unanimous opinion, although they kept the thing 5 months. I was unhappy with it with them, and I called, but it didn't amount to anything really. But they would not give me an opinion.
I think what I'm seeing may be a very, very faint impression of the 6. And that's always a condition that means that this is not the error stamp. Even if there's
Right.
the faintest trace or any mark of the missing item, then it's not the error stamp. It's just a light printing.
Well, that's an interesting speculation. I've always assumed they thought someone had canceled the stamp um, in an attempt to defraud or to increase its value.
Mm.
I really, even now, I don't really see. I do see part of the hand clasp, maybe, or I don't know.
Could you
But
show us the stamp with the 6 on it again? I'd like to see just where that 6 is located. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, so, and that it's right where I see a little grayish smudge.
This would be a good example for postmark reveal. Again, process it through that software and see if you see any evidence of the 6.
that's good, Ed. That's good. I am going to resubmit it, and I'm going to insist on a determination one way or the other. And that's true because I'm going to bring some muscle in.